Hello, I am Joshua Devora, and this is my video assignment for homework number 4 for class number 13. So first we are going to get started with talking about some terminology, the first one being low speed strength. So we test low speed strength with pretty much our maximal tests, a maximal strength test. These are things like our 1 rep max on the bench and our 1 rep max on the back squat. So the main thing we're looking to discover is our muscular strength, which is how much force a muscle or a muscle group can produce while in a full out rep while maintaining the proper form. These are strength tests are becoming more popular. They're the most preferred method by strength and conditioning professionals because they don't have to be super dynamic. The technique is easy to get down and it's not super expensive. But we are in these movements. You get the name the low speed strength because the movements performed here are typically slow with the heavy load, such as the bench. Next, we are going to look at high speed strength, which is also called muscular power. Here we are looking at your ability to generate force quickly, how fast your muscles can contract. In this movement, power combines both force and velocity. Examples of this would include jumping, sprinting, and Olympic weightlifting, such as we're looking to test your 1 rep max in things like power cleans, the snatch, the jerk. The difference between this and low speed is in these tests, they typically take 1 second to complete, while low speed strength tests take 2 to 4 seconds to complete. Next, we're going to talk about the anaerobic capacity. This is the body's ability to produce the max energy without oxygen for moderate duration muscular activity. So in these activities, we're mainly using the phosphagen and the anaerobic glycolytic system. So the difference between this and the anaerobic power test that we just discussed are these are moderate duration activities, typically lasting between 30 and 90 seconds, where we are testing the phosphagens and the anaerobic glycolytic's ability to produce maximal energy. So next we will talk about aerobic capacity, which is also referred to as aerobic power. And this is we're looking at the body's ability to produce the maximum amount of energy with oxygen. So we're using the oxidative system, which as we know is the breakdown of energy sources like carbs, fats, and proteins. Now, this is mainly more important for endurance athletes, where we are looking to see how much energy they can produce using oxygen. So next we are going to look at muscular endurance. With the keyword here being endurance, these tests are not going to be done with the maximum resistance, such as the 1 rep max. We are looking at the endurance. We're looking at the localized muscle or the muscle group, with most of these exercises going to be done with body weight, such as a chin-up or a push-up. We are going to do this muscle activity for a certain amount of time or until most of the time till failure, where we are looking to test the muscle's ability to continuously contract without getting tired. We're testing the focus, the localized muscle or muscle group's ability to resist fatigue. So next we are going to talk about agility, where agility is our ability to change direction, to stop, start, maintain balance and body control, especially in a sports setting. So oftentimes that's all that people think agility is, but recently we've come to learn that agility is also mental. It's that anticipation, the adaptability. For example, in basketball, if I go up for a rebound and I'm on the way down, am I anticipating the defender being right there? Am I going to be able to adjust my body, look up the court, see what teammates are open? So agility is not just about balance and coordination and change of direction, but it's also about anticipation. So next we are going to talk about speed. Speed is the ability to move the entire body or part of the body as quickly as possible. And we want to make sure we separate this from agility. So for example, if we were going to run a short distance, 5-10 yards as fast as possible, that would be more acceleration. Speed would be somewhere around that 40 to 50 yard range, where we're going to cover that fixed distance, and we're going to measure that time, the time it takes to cover that fixed distance. Again, for speed and agility, we want to make sure that we're wearing the proper footwork and that the weather conditions are right, it's not raining or anything, and we are have other non-slip conditions. But yeah, speed, we want to test the maximum speed we can cover, the less time it takes to cover fixed distance. So next we are going to talk about balance and stability. Balance is the ability of the body to maintain its center of mass over its base of support, while stability is the body's ability to resist that unwanted movement and maintain the body's proper positioning during the activity. So next we are going to talk about absolute strength versus relative strength. Absolute strength is the maximum amount of force a person can produce regardless of their body weight, while relative strength is the amount of force a person can produce relative to their body weight. So, for example, say we have a 250-pound athlete squatting 500 pounds. This athlete would have greater absolute strength than a 180-pound athlete only squatting 400 pounds. However, that 180-pound lighter athlete actually has a greater relative strength because he's lifting more weight compared to his body weight, relative to his body weight. So next we are going to talk about isometric versus isotonic versus isokinetic strength. Isometric strength is a force produced without movement against an immovable object. So you would think like a squat against a wall where you're holding it in that same position, or you're pushing against an immovable object. Isotonic strength involves the shortening or the stretching of muscles where they're contracting with a constant external load. This would be like a squat or a bench press where the load stays the same throughout the entire movement. And isokinetic strength involves movement that happens at a constant speed with specialized equipment. This is pretty rare because the equipment's pretty expensive, but with this equipment, it adjusts the weight throughout the entire movement and adjusts the resistance. So next we are going to look at absolute versus relative muscular endurance. Absolute muscular endurance measures how many repetitions can be performed using the same absolute load. So this would be like at the NFL combine where everyone has the 225 pounds on the bench and they're all trying to get the most reps with that same load. Relative muscular endurance measures the endurance a person can perform with a percentage of that individual's maximum strength. So you're taking, say, 55% of their 1 rep max and you're trying to see how many reps they can perform at that weight. So it's relative to their own maximum strength. So now we are going to talk about absolute versus relative muscular power. So absolute power is the total amount of power a person, an athlete, can produce regardless of their body size, while relative power is the power output divided by the body mass. This allows for more fair comparisons between athletes of different sizes. So now we're going to look at power endurance or repeated power output. So this would be our body's ability to repeatedly produce powerful explosive movements while minimizing fatigue. So this is really common in sports that requires, say, a lot of jumping. That's an explosive power movement that you have to constantly repeat in sports like basketball, like volleyball. And then in soccer where we have to constantly sprint, this is where we would constantly be more interested in power endurance. So now we're going to look at speed endurance. Speed endurance is the body's ability to maintain high velocity force output, to maintain that speed over an extended period of time or as fatigue starts to set in. Agility endurance is our ability to repeatedly change direction, to start, stop, to be mentally still able to adapt and adjust throughout the competition while fatigue begins to set in. So now we're going to look at a table so that we can examine some Z-scores. So for this table, I have chosen 6 male high school football players with at least 1 year of resistance training experience. So here's my table. We have 6 athletes named A, B, C, D, E, and F. So as you can see, we're going to look at the 1 rep max on the back squat, the vertical jump, and the 40-yard dash. So for athlete A, see back so you can see it. For athlete A, he had a 1 rep max on the back squat of 365 pounds. Athlete B had 315 pounds. Athlete C had 405 pounds. Athlete D had 275 pounds. Athlete E had 345 pounds. And athlete F had 385 pounds. So now for the vertical jump, athlete A had a jump of 30 inches. Athlete B had 27 inches. Athlete C, 33 inches. Athlete D, 24. Athlete E, 29 inches. And athlete F, 31 inches. And now for our final test, the 40-yard dash, athlete A had a 4.75 seconds 40-yard dash. Athlete B had 4.90 seconds. Athlete C had 4.6 seconds. Athlete D had 5.10 seconds. Athlete E had 4.8 seconds. And athlete F had 4.65 seconds. So now we're going to look at the average of all of them. So our average for the 1 rep max was 348.3 pounds. And how we calculate the average is we add all these values up together, and since we have 6, we divide it by that total number of 6, and which gave us 348.3 pounds. So for our vertical jump, our mean was 29 inches, and for our 40-yard dash, our mean was 4.8 seconds. So now we're going to calculate the standard deviation for each one. So for our 1 rep max on the back squat, our standard deviation was 46.3. For our vertical jump, our standard deviation was 3.16. And for our 40-yard dash, our standard deviation was 0.18. So now that we have those, we can calculate the z-scores, which I've written on here for each calculation, for each value. So for our 1 rep max value, athlete A had a z-score of 0.36. Athlete B had a z-score of negative 0.72. Athlete C's 405-pound 1 rep max on the back squat had a z-score of 1.22. Athlete D had a z-score of negative 1.58 on the back squat. Athlete E had a z-score of negative 0.07. And athlete F had a z-score of 0.79. So we went ahead and calculated all those for each values. And after we got the z-score for each value, we went ahead and summed them up for each one. So athlete A's z-scores of 0.36 for the 1 rep max on the back squat, 0.32 on the vertical jump, and 0.28 on the 40-yard dash added up to give him a z-score of 0.96. Athlete B had the z-scores of negative 0.72, negative 0.63, and negative 0.56, which they added up to give him a z-score of negative 1.91. Athlete C had z-scores of 1.22, 1.27, and 1.12, and they added up to give him a z-score of 3.61. Athlete D had z-scores of negative 1.58, negative 1.58, and negative 1.68. They added up to give him a z-score of negative 4.84. Athlete E had z-scores of negative 0.07 and 0 and 0. So his z-score went ahead and stayed at negative 0.07. Athlete F had a z-score of 2.26. He had z-scores of 0.79, 0.84, and 0.84, which added up to that 2.26 on the z-score. So looking at this, we can go ahead and we can see that the athlete with the highest z-score was athlete C with 3.61, with a z-score of 3.61, which that means he had the greatest numbers and he performed above the average on each test. Athlete, I believe it's F. Yeah, F came in second with a z-score of 2.26. And our lowest z-score was athlete D with a negative 4.84. So by looking at these z-scores, coaches can use these numbers and these values from these different performance tests to look at different areas. They can see, it makes it easier for coaches to identify the strongest, most well-rounded, all-around athletes.